In this week's episode, I'll give an honest look at the Leica M system, the things that I love and don't love about it.
Adorama TV presents Exploring Photography with Mark Wallace.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography. I'm Mark Wallace, coming to you from beautiful Lisbon, Portugal. Now, about a year ago, just less than a year ago, I made a video saying that I switched from a DSLR camera to a rangefinder, a Leica M Type 240, and that video has had well over 100 and something thousand views. It's shown up on blogs all over the place, and the comments and the discussion around that video has been quite robust. And so I thought it's probably a good idea for me to come back and talk about some of the things people are asking and saying about my switch to a rangefinder camera, because there are some things that just people are reading into the video that aren't true, and then there are a lot of questions about this system that I thought I could answer and talk about some things that worked and some things that I learned over the last year or so. And so we're going to get right into that. So first I want to talk about some of the myths, and I'm reading, there have been so many things, I'm reading from my iPad here, so I hope you'll excuse me, but the first myth I think that has been posted on the blogs is that I gave up altogether on DSLR cameras, and that is absolutely not true. I didn't get rid of my DSLR systems. I have a bunch of DSLR cameras, in matter of fact. My Canon 5D Mark III that I was using, I shipped that back to the United States. My sister, who's a photographer, is taking care of that with all my lenses, and then I have still a bunch of Nikon and Canon. I've got some Mamiya cameras, I've got Fujifilm cameras, I've got a bunch of cameras, and I didn't get rid of all of those. I'm still using those. So I was looking specifically for a tool for travel photography, and this is the tool that I chose. I did not give up on DSLR cameras. They are fantastic and probably the best choice for working in the studio, shooting sports. For travel photography, they're great. So please don't misread me in saying that I gave up on those. I absolutely did not. The other thing that people posted was that I chose this over a Fujifilm or a Sony A7R system, saying that I said that this was a better camera than those. And I don't think that's necessarily true. The Sony A7R and the A7R II and all those iterations of the new Sony systems, those are fantastic cameras. And I got the opportunity to play with one a few weeks ago in Paris, and it was sort of like flying a spaceship. That camera is spectacular. And so I think it's one of the best cameras that's come out in the last 10 years. So please don't hear me saying that the Sony is a bad camera. I think it's the opposite. I think it's a spectacular camera, and it does all kinds of things very, very well. In fact, a lot of things a lot better than the Leica camera. And also, I own a Fujifilm X Pro 1 and a bunch of Fuji X series cameras, and I love them. In fact, I've got a lot of videos on Adorama TV using my Fuji cameras, and so again, I don't want to say that this is a better camera than those for everything. I just thought this was a better system for me, specifically because I wanted a rangefinder camera. I also wanted Leica lenses because I like the color rendition, I like the clarity, the resolution, the contrast of these lenses, and I liked how the Leica body resolves these lenses because it's got some special stuff that's built in to capture wide angle lenses, how the light comes in, some little mirrors on the lens. I don't want to get into all the technicalities of that stuff. There's plenty of blogs talking about that and comparing the Sony versus the Leica and all that kind of stuff. So I want to say that the Sony is absolutely spectacular. So are Fujifilm cameras. I chose this specifically because of its simplicity and because I wanted a rangefinder camera with these, the Leica lens system in mind, and so that's the thing. All right, so those are the myths. I hope I've dispelled those and made everybody that shoots with those other cameras happy, because I love them and I want you to make sure that you know that. All right, so it's been about a year. What do I think of this? So the rangefinder system is something that I really wanted. Now, if you don't know what a rangefinder is a system for focusing. And so you're looking through a viewfinder, and that shows you what your composition is, but inside that there's a little square, and as you're focusing your lens, it's always manual focus. It will determine the range of whatever the thing is and make sure that your focus is clear. There's a little square that once things are lined up, things are in focus. But what you get with the rangefinder system, you're not looking through the lens, and so in really, really low light, you're not restricted by a closed aperture. You can see things, and with an electronic viewfinder in low light, when you put the camera to your eye, well, it can ruin your night vision, and I really don't like that. The other thing is there is absolutely no lag, because this isn't connected to the shutter or the lens, and so when you see something and click the shutter, there's nothing that's blocking your eye from what's happening. So on a DSLR camera, you never actually see what you're shooting because Well, the viewfinder is blocked by the mirror. And with an electronic viewfinder, you don't actually see what you're shooting because it's blocked by the shutter. At the rangefinder, you actually see what you're shooting. The other thing with the rangefinder is you see what you're shooting, you see the frame lines of what your lens is going to capture, but you see outside of that, so you can see things entering and leaving, and so it really helps you with decisive moment and capturing things. It's just a beautiful system, and it's one that I wanted to experience with travel photography. And I should probably make a video specifically on rangefinders and shooting with them and how they work. But that's not what this is about. I just want to say I wanted a rangefinder system. I got it. I love it. I love the experience of shooting with it. You don't see what your depth of field is going to be. You sort of learn that by intuition, changing your aperture and things. And so it's an absolutely different shooting experience and one that I wanted, and I got it. And I absolutely think this is the best camera for shooting with a rangefinder, and so that's what I got. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the lenses that I purchased. Now, when I first got this camera, I didn't have this 35mm lens. What I had is a 135, a 21, and a 50, and I started with just a 50. I thought that's what I would shoot with most. And then I saved up a little more and I bought the 21. Then I was a little nervous and I thought, well, maybe I'm not going to have a long lens for shooting telephoto stuff, long landscapes and mountains and things like that. So I got a 135. But as I started shooting over the year, I really thought that I needed something that was between the 50 and the 21. The 21 is a little too wide, the 50 was a little too long. And I got this 35. I made a video about this 35mm lens, and this has really become my go-to lens. And so if I had to do it all over again and I was starting from scratch, I think what I would do is I'd buy the body, a 35 and a 50. Or if I was doing lots of landscape photography, I'd get a 35 and a 21. The 135 is something that I think is sort of a luxury item. And if I had to do it all over again, and this was very expensive, I think I probably would have saved the money and not purchased this 135. I've used it quite a bit, but for the money, I think I would have saved on this and bought the 35 first and maybe gotten that later on. Well, the other thing that I needed to do when I got the 21mm lens requires an external viewfinder because the viewfinder that's built into the camera is not wide enough to see what the 21mm lens sees. And so originally I bought this. This is an electronic viewfinder. This is not the Leica viewfinder. This is an Olympus viewfinder. This is a VF2. These aren't even sold anymore. You have to buy them used. And the reason I got the Olympus version is because it's about 30% of the cost of the Leica version, and they are exactly the same manufacturer, the same plant, everything is the same. The only difference is the brand that's on it. That is the only difference. They are exactly the same. And so I actually found this used. Actually, it was in a little market somewhere in Asia, and I found it, sort of got lucky. And I think I paid about $175 for it, and so it was a huge savings. It's the VF2. Now you can get these used. Adorama has them in their used store occasionally, but sometimes you sort of have to go out there and find them. So the Olympus electronic viewfinder was a big savings for me. Now the thing that this allows me to do is now I have an electronic viewfinder, the thing that I said I didn't want, and I've used it quite a bit. But what I found was it's doing the exact same thing that I don't like with electronic viewfinders. It's a little bit of a lag, it blinds me at night, it's not really clear, the resolution's not very good. So what I did is I went and I ordered this from Adorama. This is the Voigtlander 21mm external viewfinder. Now this I bought specifically because it was less expensive than the Leica 21mm external viewfinder, but I met some friends that also have some Leicas and I compared their 21mm Leica external viewfinder, and what I found was I liked the Voigtlander better. It's brighter and there's less distortion, and so I sort of lucked out on the 21mm viewfinder, and so that's what I've been using most. It just sort of goes on here when I'm shooting with the 21mm lens. The other thing that I thought with using an external viewfinder like this is that I'd be going back and forth to focus and then compose my shot, and focus and compose my shot. But that's just absolutely not true most of the time, because with a wide angle lens like a 21mm, mostly what you're shooting is at hyperfocal. So there's no focusing required, or you're zone focusing, where you're just sort of using the depth of field guide and focusing beforehand. And so what's happening is you're basically just pointing and shooting, and it's absolutely liberating. It's one of the most enjoyable things about shooting with the 21 that I've experienced, because everything is crystal clear from start to finish. It's the sharpest lens, I think the sharpest lens I've ever used. It's spectacular, and every time I look at the pictures, I'm like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. So again, it's just a wonderful experience shooting with these two things. All right, let's talk about some things that don't work very well with the Leica M. There are some bummers that I've found, and they're pretty significant. So flash photography with a Leica. Any Leica purist is probably having a hissy fit right now that I'm even bringing up flash photography, because these guys are made for natural light, but I'm a studio lighting photographer and I like artificial light. So originally I ordered the SF26. This is a little external flash. This is the only flash currently available as of this video that's made by Leica for the Leica M system. It's tiny, it does TTL, but unless you're in a very small room shooting very close up, this is sort of a gutless little flash. It's just basically good for fill flash. There's not a lot of creative control over it. You can't do flash exposure compensation. You can't really do anything with it. It's just sort of put it on there. You know, it's sort of, you can make it go up and down a little bit, but it's, in my opinion, it's good for fill flash when you need it. It's not really great. I've got one, I use it occasionally just to add a pop of light, but it's worth the few $100s that you'd pay for it, I think, if you're shooting indoors, but I think a wide open aperture is better. So this is not a great flash. I did, however, meet a person in Germany who was selling their no longer manufactured Leica SF58. Now this currently was the only large speed light that was made for the Leica M system, and so I got it used from a friend in Germany, because you can't buy these anymore unless you're lucky enough to find one at Adorama used. And I have to say, it's a big, powerful flash, and the TTL system with the Leica M is absolutely disappointing, and I think it's the absolute worst TTL system I've ever used. In fact, it's so bad that I just don't ever use this in TTL mode at all. It's horrible. And so I'm using it either in manual mode, I'm triggering it with the Pocket Wizard off camera, or I just put this in auto mode and let the built-in light meter do its job. But when you have it on camera using TTL metering, there's a huge lag. It does multiple pre-flashes. It's horrible. I think Leica gets an F- on their TTL speedlight flash. So maybe they're working on something new, but right now I think it's the absolute worst system I've ever used, hands down, for that stuff. All right, a couple of other little tiny things. The other thing I bought that works okay, this is an external multifunction hand grip, and what this does is it allows me to replace the bottom plate of the Leica M. So this just pops right off. This guy pops right on. So what it does, it doesn't give you an external battery, an extra battery like the Canon and Nikon systems does. It gives you a nice little hand grip, but inside there's a GPS device, and so it does geotagging of your photos. And on the back, there are two little ports right here. And what these allow you to do is, this is an SCA port, so you can control external flashes. You can get an external adapter for that. And so there are some flash manufacturers like Metz that allow you to use SCA ports, so that's there. It's got a little port for shooting in the studio. It's got a little USB port if you want to shoot tethered. And then if you're doing long time-lapse photography or shooting in the studio or doing product photography, you might want to have an external power supply, and that also allows you to plug in an external power supply. So this external grip here gives you a GPS capability, and also gives you some capabilities for doing more kind of in-studio or time-lapse or longer time kind of shooting. What I found is I like the grip. It's okay. It's not as sturdy as I would like. The GPS on it works okay. Now, I'm a GPS nut. I've got a Garmin GPS watch. I've got all kinds of Garmin GPS devices, and I timed it. And for this GPS device to lock onto the satellite takes anywhere from 10, sometimes 15 minutes, whereas my Garmin watch usually takes about 2 to 3 minutes in a bad scenario. So some days I'm walking around and this just never locks onto the GPS at all. So I'm going to say that this gets a C- for its GPS capabilities. It just doesn't lock on fast enough, and some days if you're walking around it never locks on, and so that's going to be disappointing. The other thing that you can get with this external hand grip is this little finger loop thing, and what that allows you to do, and I got this just because I thought, well, I'll just try it out. It allows you to put your finger through there and you get a little bit firmer grasp. And this I actually really, really love because you're not going to drop your camera. It really gives you a firmer grasp, and you can get rid of your camera strap altogether, and it works really well. So that's just something I use when I'm walking around, and it's worth the money for that, and they come in different sizes. Now the last thing I want to talk about is this, the battery. A lot of people talked about the battery life on the M and said it wasn't very robust. In fact, the battery runs out really quickly. But what I found is I bought an external battery for this, a spare battery, but I have never run out of battery. I shoot all day long. I did that photo challenge with Gavin Hoey, and I shot I don't know how many photos, but I shot from sunrise to sunset all over, and my one battery worked just fine. And so the only reason I've ever had to use this external battery is if I forget to charge the first battery and I wake up and go, oh, I forgot to charge it, and I'll swap those out. But even with the GPS going, my single batteries lasted all day. Now granted, I haven't shot in really cold weather, that could affect that, and I don't shoot really much video with my Leica, so that could also be something that would affect battery life. So I recommend getting an external battery, extra battery, just in case you might need it. But I haven't run out of my battery that's in the camera. I found it to be a really, really good battery. All right, well that is, oh, one more thing I want to make sure I mention, and that is this 135mm lens. A lot of people on blogs talked about the focusing with this and the built-in viewfinder. A lot of people have posted saying that you need the electronic viewfinder to focus a lens that's 135mm long because the rangefinder is just not accurate enough. I've found that to be absolutely not true. I've been able to focus my 135 all over the place, no problem with just the built-in rangefinder. I had no idea that there was even an issue with it until I started reading posts on blogs and comments to the video of people saying, hey, you need an external viewfinder. I'm like, you don't. The internal rangefinder focusing mechanism works just fine in my experience for the 135. I've had no issues focusing, so I didn't have a need for buying the electronic viewfinder for focusing a longer lens. Maybe that's true if you do a different lens adapter and do a 200 or 300mm lens. If you're shooting video, absolutely you need an electronic viewfinder to focus on the fly, but for stills, I didn't need one for this big long lens. All right, that's a ton of stuff. I hope this resolves some of the questions and comments that people have made about the Leica M system, and I hope that will help you out. Now remember, there's a lot more information at the Adorama Learning Center about rangefinder cameras, mirrorless cameras, which not necessarily a rangefinder camera, they're two different things, and also about prime lenses and all kinds of stuff, the video about the 35mm lens. There's just a ton of stuff over there. So zip over to the Adorama Learning Center, you'll learn a lot more. And don't forget to subscribe to Adorama TV, where you'll see all the videos and you can see all the cool pictures and videos and things that I've made with this camera, because I absolutely love it. And I think it's worth every single penny. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you again next time.
Do you want great looking prints at low cost? Be sure to visit our easy to use online printing service. Adorama Pix has professionals who treat your images with the utmost care that you can count on. For a quick turnaround on photos, cards, or albums, use AdoramaPix.com.